We'll move to B, presentation and possible direction to staff on strategies the city council may want to consider implementing to conduct the business of the city during council meetings more efficiently. Mr. Camerino, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. After discussions with the mayor, he requested that we do some research on what ideas we may be able to bring forward for the council to consider to, as the mayor said, to conduct the business of the city at city council meetings more efficiently. So we've done a little bit of research and are bringing some of those ideas to you for discussion this evening. Oh, I just messed that up, sorry. Did you put that back up, Gail? All right, sorry about that, hit the wrong button. So this evening, a couple of topics that we'll discuss is workshops, holding a workshop prior to either every council meeting or at least one council meeting an evening, a limit on presentations, citizens communication, possibly revising the timeline or the time for citizens to address at city council. And I'll provide some research and background information on what other cities do as well. Public hearings, possibly revising the timeline or time allotted for those things. And then the possibility of implementing a speaker registration form, which really would just add some structure to citizens' communications or anyone wanting to speak to the city council on any item that may be posted on an agenda. So the first thought is to hold a workshop prior to maybe every council meeting or possibly one council meeting. Taking a look at what some of the other cities do, they actually will hold a workshop, much like what you all did today. You actually held a workshop or a meeting at 3 o'clock today and conducted certain type of business. What we could do is to hold a workshop either at 3, 3:30 or 4 o'clock and get some of the items that are on this screen accomplished during that meeting. For example, proclamations. The council could then read proclamations during this workshop and then receive presentations. That there's really no formal action to be taken by the council other than to provide staff with direction on either coming back with an amendment to an ordinance or some along those lines. And then we would also post the executive session at that workshop as well, and also post it at the 6 p.m. meeting, so that if we don't get the executive session accomplished or completed before 6 p.m., then we can always do that at the end of the regular council meeting. So that's one idea for the council to consider. I think that this would be a very beneficial a strategy that the council could implement. It would not require any formal action. You're allowed to schedule as many meetings as you'd like. You at least have to have the regularly scheduled council meetings that are part of the charter. But the council could then hold any workshop that you may want. And so that's something for us to discuss. Maybe difficult for 3 o'clock, maybe 3:30 works better. But again, that's one option. Also, a limit on presentations. So this could cover all presentations or any introductions from any outside organizations on any agenda items. So there could be two ways that this could be done. One is to set a maximum limit on the number of slides that are presented, or a maximum time for presenting information, like 10 minutes. It could be something more than that. But again, this is really just to initiate the conversation with you all about some of the things that could be possible. Again, no formal action would need to be taken by the council. In other words, you wouldn't have to amend an existing ordinance or resolution to be able to accomplish that, much like the workshop. Another idea would be with regards to citizens communications. Currently, the city of New Braunfels provides 5 minutes for anyone to speak, whether it's citizens communications or on any item that's on the agenda. And actually, this is not the full list. But I can tell you, I'll send that to you. So we did some research on what other cities provide, and we used the comparator cities that we use during our budget process to gain a lot of information about, right? And so some of the cities that we have on our list here is, for example, Austin, 3 minutes, Allen, 3 minutes, Bryan, 3 minutes, Cedar Park, 3 minutes, College Station, 3 minutes, Conroe, 3, Denton, 3, Flower Mound, 3, Georgetown, 3, Grapevine, 3, League City, 3, Missouri City, 3, North Richland Hills, 3, Pflugerville, 3, Richardson 3, Round Rock 3, San Marcos 3, Schertz 3, and Seguin 5. This is not the complete list. I'll email this to you all. I apologize for that. So that is something else that the council consider, is just revising that time from 5 minutes to 3 minutes. Another option would be that you could also then apply a maximum amount of time to citizens' communications. Rather than have an unlimited time, the council could set a maximum time of, say, 30 minutes, for example. Public hearings. So currently, when the council holds a public hearing, you'll provide 30 minutes for and 30 minutes against the item. That's an entire hour then on one agenda item. And under the current structure at 5 minutes, really, if they all use all 5 minutes, you'll get 6 speakers in. If you were to revise, if you want to maintain it to be 30 minutes for and 30 minutes against, at 3 minutes, you could actually get even more speakers in. You could get 10 speakers in. If you were to want to consider reducing that from 30 to, say, 20, then it would be a total of 40 minutes, and you could get pretty much the same amount of speakers if you did currently at 30 minutes at 5 minutes each. You would still get 6, possibly 7, depending if everyone utilized all 3 of their minutes. Now, this would require amending an existing ordinance to implement any change to this. And the last option to consider, and there are certainly others, but just wanted to bring a couple of them to you for consideration, is that some cities do require speaker registration forms. In other words, anyone that wishes to speak to the council then must fill out a registration form. And on this, they would provide their name, their address, meaning they wouldn't actually have to verbalize their address at the podium, which we have heard some concern about because it would be on the speaker registration form. Okay? And then which agenda item they wish to speak on. They would then hand that to the city secretary's office. In fact, they would be out there helping people fill those forms out. They would then take those forms and then work with the mayor on categorizing those based on the agenda item they wish to speak on. The mayor would then have those based on agenda item, and then could call up people when we get to a specific agenda item. Then the mayor could use those speaker registration forms and start to call people up and say, the first one would be so-and-so. The next one, please come right up. You'll be number 2, so-and-so. That way you don't have this sort of awkward wait for people to wonder if they could go next. Am I going to wait for someone else to come and speak? It could actually be a lot more efficient doing it that way. And then, of course, the council could then consider revising the time from, say, 5 to 3 minutes. Oh, did you? All right, would you go back, please? Go back to the list that I read off to you, but I think it'd be beneficial for you to just see it. Okay. So here's the list. Again, you'll see that the only city on this list that provides 5 minutes is the city of Seguin, like we do. All of the other cities that we looked at and researched were 3 minutes. San Antonio, I believe, that is not on this list. San Antonio, I believe, also provides 3 minutes as well. That's all that I have. We can certainly discuss next steps. The council, if you wish to consider these, we can have further discussion, bring this back to another agenda for us to continue to have discussions about it. If you wish to provide me direction on, these are some of the things that we would like to begin implementing, like, for example, the workshop. But again, that would probably necessitate a discussion about availability, right? But if there is anything that I've presented that would require formal action, then we can certainly have further discussion on it, or you can give me direction tonight, and then we can bring back an ordinance amendment for you all to consider at a future date.
Thank you, Mr. Camerino. Any questions or comments from council?
I appreciate staff's work on this. My only advice is if we implement any of this before we go to the 3 or 3:30 workshop, we try to implement these other ideas during the regular council meeting and see how much more effective that makes time before we go to adding a 3 or 3:30 work. I'm just speaking for myself on that, but I think there's some good ideas here, but I would consider if we go anywhere on this, that once again, we try to do those things during the regular meeting that reduce time, but still give citizens the opportunity to speak as well before we start moving things to 3 o'clock or 3:30, because regardless of our schedules, I think there's folks in the community that may not be able to get here at those times, and especially on presentations. Proclamations may not matter, but I know we have a lot of folks that speak during our meetings about presentations, and I really would like to keep those, if we can, still more to the traditional time if possible.
Any other comments from council?
Yeah, the one thing that I would want to make sure is if we did go to a 3-minute timeframe, that we find a way to make it fair so that, either chosen at random or something so that things, like we don't have the same speakers every single time when other people, if they're running out of time, if we make it 30 minutes and 3-minute limits, that we don't end up with, the same people speaking all the time and new people not getting an opportunity to speak. So maybe if we chose those names at random or found some system that was fair, that way everybody got a chance to voice their concerns.
Thank you.
The council would also have the opportunity, say by a vote, to extend that time to something else. If you were to want to apply a maximum amount of time for citizens' communications, that the council could also extend that based on a vote of the council in increments of 10 minutes or 15 minutes, something along those lines.
I'll just make a comment. I think it's a good idea to have the registration, because I've had people give me feedback. Yeah, they don't really want to give all that information on the, public TV and everything like that. And it'll keep it,
Sir?
I think it'd be simpler too with the other part of the process that we were talking about.
Yeah, Mr. Camerino, thank you for the presentation. With the 3 minutes that we have listed here, do they also have registration?
I don't know I can tell you that Georgetown actually does, and I think several of those do. We can certainly add that information as another column on this, as whether they have a speaker
I agree
registration
with-
form or some sign-up sheet, something that requires them to sign up to speak to address the city council.
I agree with my fellow councilman that registration is a good way to go. Thank you.
Again, it's just really about providing some structure to citizens addressing its elected officials.
Certainly want to try to include more people. I appreciate Councilmember Campos's comments as well as, if you reduce it a bit, then you get more people to be able to comment, whether it's for or against or whatever it might be. And then, of course, the registration forms are important because we've heard that several meetings over the last several months that people are concerned about having their address be mentioned, and we could eliminate that part of that comment time for the citizen to speak. So, anyone else? Appreciate the time you've put into this to look into ways to be able to make this happen. So, as with all presentations, yes, we're going to open it up for comments or questions. So, please step up, state your name and address for the record. Limit your comments to 5 minutes.
Jim Holster, 234 Elmwood Drive. Appreciate you looking at this because I've seen it on other cities too. They have different procedures. And I've also noticed some of our committees hold their, and various groups sometimes hold their meeting not in this room or where there's video recordings. I understand there might be audio recordings when that occurs. So I think you need to look at that so that there's more communication out there. So that if you're going to reduce this time so that people can see what these subcommittees are doing, are different committees for the city, and post audio. So that's one thing I think you should look at to increase communication. Time, you can reasonably cut it down. 3 is kind of sharp, 4 would be nice. But the real thing that bothers me, if you're really into increasing communication, is it would be very helpful if you could, most people know how to operate PowerPoint. My 10-year-old granddaughter does PowerPoint presentations. And it's old school thinking that you cannot run a security check on those. So that if somebody's going to be cut to 3 minutes, you can get that presentation done effectively in 3 minutes with PowerPoint slides to me walking over there or the other person. So think about that. Because if you talk to IT guys, there is a way that you can check even if I bring it with a slide, with a disk, you can check it before. You can put that into procedures that I make that available to you 10 days before, 5 days before, or whatever. So consider that in your process and find out what other cities do on this. Do they not allow people to do formal presentations? And I also notice from time to time, the city has speakers come up who are not city staff, and they have presentations, PowerPoint. So I assume that somebody, your IT guy, is running security log check on those. And as I said, I work for the state, we did it all the time. So forcing people to use a old technology when there's new technology, and the city has some of the best technology, we need to do the same for our citizens in these presentations. Thank you.
Anyone else?
David Warmke, 472 Seeley in Bronzeville, Texas. As you guess, I probably have a plethora of thoughts here. But first, let me start out with a compliment. I started speaking here 5 years ago. It was when Castell started, and there was this. There was a microphone, there was no podium, there was no place to hold your paper. You had to stand here and hold your paper and talk. It was not very friendly. Since then, we have made great strides. The podium is here, and we now can do projections, so it is a much friendlier place to talk. The timer is an absolute fantastic addition to allow one to look down and glance and see where things are going on. I'll give you sort of a tongue-in-cheek thing that you might think of including. I think you ought to have some requirements, but maybe send people to Toastmasters before they can speak. I see so many people up here, and it's sort of my thing. I do Toastmasters. A lot of people don't know how to communicate, particularly when somebody sets their phone down over there and they're trying to get an image of the phone. That just does not work. But you see a lot of people do that. But it is a privilege and honor to be able to speak here. And it's also one of our rights. And as you listen to some of the subjects that come up, a lot of times people are very frustrated by the fact they feel they're not heard. And I realize some of them get kind of long, kind of get redundant, and you may not want to hear that, but you give people an opportunity to speak. And when we had the NBU thing here come out, that was a very, very long meeting. I don't think we would have wanted to limit that to 20 minutes and people speak, because there were a whole lot of people that wanted to vent. Allowing them to vent and then just to acknowledge that you've heard them is a very powerful thing in leadership, and realizing that you're listening, as most people aren't connected enough to realize that you are. Now, thoughts of proposals. 3 minutes would work, but being able to do a PowerPoint as opposed to a laptop would be, I think, something that needs to be included if we're going to cut down to 3 minutes, as that would increase the efficiency of doing a presentation. Selecting people that speak, that's a can of worms. And that can be interpreted as muzzling people and not allowing free speech. I would be very, very cautious of deciding we're going to give a checklist and the mayor or somebody decide who gets to speak and who doesn't. That, I think, is a really, really bad idea. It is an honor and a privilege to be able to speak and to communicate. And the biggest part of communication is listening. Now, I've sat through a lot of meetings lately, and the thing that I run into on the long meetings are usually when there is some sort of hot button issue that's there, and we spend an hour, sometimes it'll be 2 hot button issues a meeting, that goes on and on and on and on. And some of those are sort of real hot buttons, and some of those are sort of just you hear 30 minutes of speech to fill the time to sort of push something through that I'm not always quite in agreement with, that kind of just looks like fluff. But that, to me, seems to be the major issue. I don't know the time that is spent for listening to citizens' communication, but that's a very important thing. It's a good thing to think and consider. Anytime you limit people's speech, you have to really think about being careful what you're doing there, that you're doing it correctly, but still allowing people to speak. God bless you. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else?
Ryan Garcia, 650 North Hill Circle. A few points that I have, and just kind of looking at the first thing, in regards to starting the workshops at 3 p.m., I think it's great, and I appreciate all you guys do here, but I know a lot of you work full-time job as well. As long as other people coming into council, anyone who want to be on council in the future, has to take that into consideration, where now, every 2 weeks, they're having to leave their job 2 hours early to get here to accommodate for that. So that is a concern that I have, especially when I know your guys' jobs are not, they're not full-time jobs up here, I shouldn't say up there, but you're, being on council, it's not a paid position, minus the little small per meeting stipend you guys get. So leaving your other job, whatever you have to do, I know not all of you have, some of you are retired and have that luxury, but leaving early like that sometimes can be a problem, and just put more of a constraint on things and getting quality people up on council. So just something to consider there. The second thing I would love for us to take a look at is actually the breakdown of percentages of where we actually spend most of our time at city council. Is that truly in citizen communication? Is that on proclamations? Is that on individual items? Where is that time actually broken down to, and seeing a percentage of that to see where our time is truly going? So if there's any way we can kind of get that, Mr. Cameron, that'd be great to see, just to say, okay, we're spending 25% of our time on citizen communication, or we're spending 90% of our time on individual items. It'd be great to kind of look at that, to look at where is most of our time truly going? The last, two more items I have is, I didn't see any recommendations into limiting the number of items on the actual individual items for consideration. I've been in meetings here, and it almost goes to the entire alphabet, where it's A through Z. We have almost 26 different items, individual items for consideration. How can we work to limit those items and say, hey, maybe we can just limit this 15 items max and try to prioritize which items need to be brought to council? I think that'd be great for something to look at for that as well. And then the last thing I have is, obviously you all know there are times here where there are, I guess you could say, more very high impact items that are on the agenda, where it's like, okay, the room is full and there's people who want to have their voices heard. Well, do we make exceptions for that? How do we go about making exceptions for those individual items where we have large crowds showing up? So just a few things to consider as we look to make these alterations.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to make comments on this presentation? Okay, we'll move on. Thank you, Mr. Camerino. I think we'll continue to look at those options, and we've heard some good suggestions here.
Well, I'll put this back on an agenda soon. We'll gather some additional information, come back to you all, and then I'll be looking for direction on what you all may want to consider with regards to amendments to any existing ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you very much.